Now welcome to another lightning response video where let's do a couple questions here today, starting with this one from Civil Maniac, who simply asked, "Hey Thor, is there any hope for Skeleton Crew?" And while I really do want to enthusiastically say yes, there's a ton of hope, and then move on to the next question, as I like to say, I do always root for Star Wars. I do always want it to be good. And so I'd love to say I'm super excited for this and list off all the reasons why I think it's going to be great. But the problem is there have been some insider leaks or reports that have come out that say the show has had nothing but problems behind the scenes. That literally while making it, they were unsure what they even wanted it to be. And it kind of ended up being something that no one making it even liked or wanted it to be. But it was the only thing that made sense for them to do with it. Which, yeah, sounds a little crazy. It sounds crazy that you would start making a show when that potentially costs hundreds of millions of dollars and not have a very clear vision for it, or that maybe, or more likely, they started making it and kind of realized this isn't very good and had to change it on the fly, but then realized the changes were only making it worse and then went back to the original idea. And it's still not so good. I don't know how true or false these reports are. Sometimes these insider leaks are all or completely BS, and other times they're right on the money. Though I will say the fact that this thing has been delayed quite a bit, that originally it was supposed to or thought to be coming out last year, late last year, like October, November last year, that probably isn't a very good sign. Though, yes, the writer's strike last summer did, apparently from, again, some of the reports we've heard from some sources inside Lucasfilm or wherever, they did say it has played some sort of part in the delay, which is kind of interesting or odd because, as far as we know, it filmed from September of 2022 until January of 2023, and that would mean it would have been done filming before the strikes even started. Which then means, and this is also something I have heard, that when they did some test screenings of what they had, people didn't like it and they went back to the drawing board essentially, and then the strike happened and this whole thing has just become a complete mess. And again, how true any of these reports are is unknown, but either way, the fact that it's been delayed so much and that we really haven't heard all that much about it in general is certainly concerning. I think it's safe to say it hasn't been the best or smoothest production ever, and if they thought they had a smash hit on their hands, we'd probably have heard more about it by now, or it would have even just come out by now, that it wouldn't have been delayed by about a year. And for those curious about what we do know about the show, what it'll be about, well, we know it's supposed to be about 4 kids who apparently discover something strange on or about their homeworld and then make their way out into the galaxy, and then something happens. We know that Jude Law is in it. There have been, again, reports that he could be anything from sort of a wayward Jedi to maybe the villain of the show, or both. That he portrays the kids somehow and gets them into a mess that they need to get out of. We also know this is going to be set in the Mandoverse time period and have heard things like it's supposed to be a little something like Stranger Things, where it's about kids but isn't necessarily for kids, but that it isn't not for kids either. And yes, that is almost word for word what I've heard about it, or heard it described as. I've also heard reports that it's got maybe this sort of Goonies vibe to it, that it's really, again, like a Stranger Things in a way, trying to capture that 80s feel or magic to be like the movies of that era where kids were always getting into these big grand adventures, and it's all about friendship in the end. And like I said at the top, I do hope it somehow ends up being really, really good. I'm certainly not against the idea of, Star Wars doing something that is more fun and just kind of pure adventure from time to time, or always adding elements of fun into the shows and movies that they do. Though, like I said in a video the other day, I don't think that means Star Wars is supposed to be kind of silly, or that it's sometimes being really, really goofy or just bad or poorly written is part of the charm of the franchise, like some try to claim it is. Like I pointed out in that video, whether you agree with it yourself or not, but Empire Strikes Back and Revenge of the Sith, the darkest and most serious of the films, and the ones that have the least amount of humor, you could say, They tend to be regarded as the best and favorite films from the trilogies. Alright, and now let's kind of shift gears a bit and get to this question or comment from Darth Vader. And I'm going to break it into pieces and respond to it that way instead of reading it all at once and then responding. Anyway, they began by saying, "Hey Thor, nothing personal, but you are the problem with Star Wars. Not personally, but collectively, analyzing every minutia that is brought to our screens is a damaging process to viewership numbers." Alright, so I'm going to pause right there and say, what about when I and others say very nice things about Star Wars shows and help viewership? For example, I've literally had people, many people actually, tell me the only reason they finally watched Andor was because I kept talking about it and recommending it, and so they finally gave it a chance and they really enjoyed it. I even have a fun video on my other channel called something like the top 10 reasons why you should watch Andor. In other words, it seems like this can kind of go both ways, right? Seems like when something is actually good, I and others will praise it and help viewership because I was far from the only one saying really good things about Andor and maybe kind of convincing people to watch it. But when it's bad, when a show is bad, I might criticize it and potentially hurt viewership. However, is that really my fault when they're bad, or do I deserve credit when they're good? Because I am not the one making these shows. I am not the one writing them and then spending maybe $180 million to create something like The Acolyte. I'm not the one going back to Skeleton Crew now, who apparently greenlit a show or started working on one and then realized halfway through making it, it had problems and that it had to be reworked entirely, potentially. I'm not the one doing these things or making these decisions, I'm just the one spotting them and calling them out for doing it. Basically here, it is 100% their job to put out quality content that can stand up to the criticism of Star Wars fans. And we fans do literally pay for it. We pay for the Disney Plus subscriptions, or for the movie tickets, or buy the merchandise. And that then, I fully believe, gives us the right, if not a sort of obligation, as I've talked about before, to judge it, to be critical of it if we're not getting the best product for our money. Any other business or industry, people will seek out opinions to know if the business is worth giving their money to. And I don't really think it should be all that different with entertainment. And if they don't want the scrutiny of Star Wars fans, well, there is a very easy option. Don't make Star Wars. Don't use this franchise, and instead do something completely original. And if they did that, I and many, many other Star Wars fans are not going to care about it at all, which is, of course, the problem. A lot of people wouldn't care or watch these shows if they didn't have the Star Wars name or logo affixed to them. Because, on their own, they're not very good a lot of the time. Them being Star Wars sometimes is the best part about them, if you will. That name, and again that logo, gives them a guaranteed audience. And as I've said before, what Disney actually paid $4 billion for when they purchased Lucasfilm wasn't actually Star Wars itself. It wasn't for the stories and the lore and all of that they really wanted. It was the fans they wanted. It was for the built-in audience that came along with all that. So yeah, I'm sorry that I'm not sorry that I may, to some degree, affect the viewership of these shows, good or bad. I'm not sorry that I'm here to hold Disney and Lucasfilm accountable to the fans that love Star Wars and give them their hard-earned money. And if you don't agree with my takes, that is perfectly fine too. You do not have to listen to them. Nobody has to listen to me or any other YouTuber. And so let's now get back to your comment. We live in a world now that doesn't have people thinking for themselves. We have become far too lazy. It's easier to ride the opinion of content creators than actually watch and enjoy, or not, as the case may be, with no external influences. It's a schoolyard mentality or collective opinion because all channels spew the same narratives, and it's easier to follow like sheep than have your own opinion. But the thing is, we don't all spew the same narrative, not even close. There are, for example, some channels out there that love and praised The Acolyte, and then there are other channels that were far, far harsher on it than I ever was. And if we're being honest, people just kind of tend to gravitate towards the channels that say what they want to hear. They listen to the people who are saying what matches what their beliefs already are. And personally, I always appreciate the comments from people who say something like, You know, Thor, I don't always agree with your opinions or your takes, but I respect them. And that's really what we need to learn how to do more of in this world in general, not just Star Wars. Because I don't think that the problem is necessarily that people are too lazy to think. Rather, we now live in a world that is just absolutely flooded with opinions, where we get them all the time from everywhere and everyone, very much unsolicited a lot of the time. And there's so many that we tend to want to just kind of drown out the ones that, again, aren't saying what we want to hear. As I have said before, the greatest thing about the internet is that it gives everyone a voice and allows them to express their opinion. And the worst thing about the internet is that it gives everyone a voice and allows them to express their opinion. And so, again, what that basically allows us to do is to simply seek out those who agree with us on pretty much everything and become virtually surrounded by them to the point where we feel like we must be right or justified because so many of us feel the very same way about something. And that anyone who doesn't agree with what, again, feels like our majority opinion must automatically be wrong, or even some sort of enemy that, again, stands outside of what we now fully believe is right or what the norm should be because of how many of us believe it. Basically, what I'm saying here is that I don't think the problem is that people don't think, it's that they don't try to think or look at things from other perspectives. It's way too easy in this day and age to get your beliefs reinforced to the point where, as I was just saying, they grow beyond just being an opinion or a belief. They become an absolute truth because you and so many other people agree with you that you feel like you must be 100% in the right. But anyway, let us get back to the comment now, and it continued by saying, when I was watching Star Wars as a child, you didn't come home from the theater and have the option to cast an opinion to the masses. It was your opinion, and it stopped there. The next chance you had to see the movie was scraping the money together for a second theater visit, or waiting anywhere from 2 to 5 years for a VHS release before you could properly sit down and rewatch and dissect a movie's good or bad qualities. Alright, and though I completely understand where you are coming from, though I lived those days as well, and yeah, there is something kinda just nice and simple about the pre-internet world that I do miss, where you are not being bombarded with opinions all of the time. But there is also something nice about being able to find others so easily to share your interests with. I've talked before about how when I was younger, no one I knew was into Star Wars the same way I was, not even close. Especially when we moved into the 90s and it had kind of faded far from the mainstream. And that is when I started to get into the EU, and I literally had no one to talk to about it. For almost a decade, I just read and loved Star Wars all by my lonesome self, which, it's fine. That was how the world was back then. But at the same time, it kind of sucked. And then around the time of The Phantom Menace, I discovered internet forums, Star Wars forums, and it was revolutionary for me. It was so nice to be able to talk some Star Wars with people for the first time in, a frickin' decade. It was the coolest thing ever to find people who loved it the same way I did and didn't get tired of talking about it. Hell, the reason why I started doing YouTube in the first place roughly 8 years ago now was to find that same sort of thing, to find a maybe smallish community of fellow fans that just wanted to chat about it. I never thought in my wildest dreams that my YouTube channel would grow beyond maybe a few hundred subscribers at most. And again, I just wanted to find a few cool people to chat with. But it turned out that I found a little bit more than a few hundred people, and I have made a career out of talking some Star Wars, which is something that would have blown the mind of the kid 30 years ago reading Heir to the Empire all alone and wishing he could talk to someone about it. This is literally a dream come true for me, and it is because of all of you. It is because the people who watch me that I get to do this, and I am so appreciative. I am so thankful to everybody who watches. And for those who are maybe kind of curious, and I get asked this question from time to time, but part of the reason why I start every video out saying the word now is because I see my channel as one very long conversation with my fellow Star Wars fans. And every new video is just a return to that conversation, and so I start that return by saying now. And speaking of that, I think it is time to end the conversation for now, which means that is all I've got for you this time. Now it is your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about any or all of this. Or you can always ask a question for a future lightning response video. All you got to do is start your comment off with "Hey Thor" and then ask away. But whatever you choose to do, leave a comment below and let's continue to talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.